Hey, good evening, everybody. We're got the cold polar air flowing down from Canada, and we've just got high clouds here. In fact, what you see here, this is subtropical cirrus coming in from Mexico and the Pacific. So the flow aloft is still basically a tropical air mass. In fact, there's really no sign of any polar air at the higher levels except for the increased flow. But down near the surface, we've got winds out of the north. And let's take a look at the charts. And this shows the pattern that we've got this evening here, where we're at here in Texas. And we've got north winds, and I can hear the leaves blowing outside. Hang on a second. Okay, so we've got a 1037 millibar high up over the Dakotas. Large area of cold air pushing southward, so we're seeing very gusty winds at Nashville, Memphis, Little Rock, Shreveport, Dallas, and Austin. And then here you can kind of see the tail end of the front, and looks like it's pretty much in the higher terrain around trying to think of the stations there, Moriarty and Roswell. And if you go out west of there, you can see 60s, very surprising, in 71 there at around the Las Cruces area. So very warm air. In fact, if we overlay the potential temperature, let me show you that. I'll just switch over to that chart. And there we go. You can definitely see the temperature gradient right here in central Mexico. So basically anywhere from Tucumcari to Albuquerque, that's where that front is sitting, and it's probably on the warm side of the gradient right in here. Now another way, of course, we can look at that is with the SPC experimental outlook. Remember, we've got some products we can look at, and I don't think potential temperature is explicitly in here, but if you pick out the right product, it does show up, and I think that's under velocity tensor magnitude that it comes up. And let me double check that at the bottom, surface theta E. We looked at this yesterday, and this is from the rapid refresh model, and there it is. You can see the edge of the polar air. In fact, there's some pretty good coverage near the Rio Grande and down in New Mexico, so we can kind of use that as a baseline as where the frontal position is. And that can be important in the springtime when you're forecasting Big Bend thunderstorms or storms down in the Sanderson, Del Rio area. That little hint there of where the front is can really help you out when it's starting to lift northeastward. So, tail end of the front, basically from about Van Horn up to Moriarty, Alamosa, and then on up towards the front range of Colorado there. It looks like we pick up another boundary even further north. Looks kind of shallow there on the western periphery of that front. And another thing that this shows, which is pretty interesting, well, we can see the leading edge of the front here, certainly, but you can see a little bit of banding back behind the front. So that can be indicative of a secondary surge back there. So if you're down in this area around Little Rock or the Red River, you might notice that as this boundary passes, the winds might pick up a little bit stronger, and temperatures might drop a little faster back behind that front. Okay, then out ahead of the front, definitely got that little area of showers extending from New York down to Alabama and Mississippi. So this is kind of a sign of things to come. We're going to be getting into convective weather here soon, probably another month or two, and things will be getting a lot more active. All right, let me take a look at the chat, make sure there's no problems. I'm watching the panel here like a hawk, make sure we don't have any problems. And everything looks green, and don't have a mic shut down or anything like that. So let me put that back where it belongs, and let me take a look at chat here. Got Ron Chalfant there in Southern California, and Burl H., David Moore, Fun with Tech is here, Mr. Manlet, 11 degrees at Rockford there with that front blowing on through. Adam Davis, 31 degrees in Clarion, Pennsylvania, looking for a sharp drop there. Panda Lover says it's cold in Michigan. Megan John reporting 0 degrees in Minnesota. Deep freeze. Brett Dean, 43 degrees and expecting snow and rain there in Jersey. David Moore talking about storm group chasers. Yes, yeah, feel free to mention that. I have no problem if people want to plug their weather-related site or activities. That's fine. Where I draw the line, of course, is if somebody's on here selling handbags and Nikes and stuff like that. Mike Estwick, teens and asking about teen temperatures in Michigan. Ryan Toomey's joining us from Florida, and Mike Estwick reporting 31 degrees and cloudy in Denver. So there's the story. There's the temperature anomaly, and this is a very valuable product. There it is up there. You can see temperature anomaly, 2 meters, standard observation height in Celsius degrees. And it's comparing the GFS to the CFSR. I'm not too sure what that is. It's probably some sort of climatological database there. But anyway, this pretty much paints out the leading edge of the front at 0Z a couple of hours ago. And even with the post-frontal air in the Dallas area, it's still warmer than normal. And we can also trace the front in the mountains of Mexico there. So this can be of a lot of help when you get back in that rugged terrain and when it gets kind of hard to pick out the front. You can just go by the temperature anomaly, and that can help you out a bit. And even up in Alaska here, we can kind of trace out exactly where the front is. And it looks like with this southerly flow from that island got renamed. It used to be Queen Charlotte Island, and it's Guida High. I've already forgotten that. But anyway, flowing up from there towards Juneau, southerly flow. This is warm advection, so that indicates a warm front. So we'd expect to see deteriorating weather in that region right there around Juneau and Ketchikan. But elsewhere, yeah, there's all that cold polar air flowing down from the northern regimes, northern latitudes, and meanwhile in Arizona, much above normal. Looks like it's running about 14 to 16 Celsius degrees above normal in that area there, especially the Four Corners area. And if you brought that air down to sea level, 36 Celsius, that's about 97 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's definitely some warm air lurking in that region right there. Okay, moving on to the other charts. Let's do region by region. That's kind of fun. And we can use that as a jumping off point into the soundings. Not much going on in the northwest. We'll just start with the southwest U.S. right there. Okay, so here we go. We know. Let's start with what we know. We know that there's some sort of front back around New Mexico, and I forgot, is there a front in this area? I don't think there is. Let me go back and check. A little bit of a gradient from Las Vegas up to Salt Lake City. However, I don't think that's anything of significance, so I don't think we're going to see much on that southwestern U.S. chart. So I'm just going to run that through super quick and take a look. There's today's weather. That's all tropical air, highs in the 60s in Vegas. And 60 at Tonopah, that's definitely very warm. And Area 51, looking about 59 there this afternoon. Your UFOs, they require low, high-density air to really work optimally there. Anyway, there's basically a plateau high up there in Utah, lurking off to the north part of the chart. And looks like over the next couple of days, just a little bit of a plateau high taking hold there, a little bit of radiational cooling, generating a little cold air. So a little bit of a north flow there in Vegas, but other than that, it does look warm in this region. So let's go where there is weather. Let's go to Texas first. We've had a pretty significant change here the past 24 hours. This is what it looked like this morning. And you can see that this isobar here, it's got kind of a convex look there. That's because there's a low pressure area right there in the northeastern part of Texas this morning. So with that low there, we can pretty much trace the fronts. And that links on up with the Midwest system. So that's an outgoing low pressure area. Just moving on up the boundary kind of as a wave. So we would expect the southward advance of the cold air to be kind of braked out ahead of that. So slower than average progress. Meanwhile, on the backside, very fast progress of that cold air mass south. So let's track that wave. Let's advance it maybe 6 hours. Look at this. It looks like it moved on up to Little Rock. And that's a thing we do see during the spring, these little stable waves along the fronts. And you have to be kind of good at picking that out, looking at the surface data and keeping track of that, because that can influence your wind field out ahead of it, and of course your helicity. So it looks like that little wave moved on up to Little Rock, and back behind it, cold air spilling southward. So that brings us to the current time, 02Z, front from about Jackson, Mississippi, down to, looks like the woodlands of Texas, all the way through San Antonio, and then of course back to New Mexico, and the freeze line located up here. So let's see what it looks like over the next 48 hours. There's morning, looks like just above freezing in the DFW area, and then during the day, a little bit of a warm-up. We come up to 50s, so that's not very strong of a front at all. Most of the cold air all the way up here. And then that brings us to Saturday. Here comes the southerly flow. So that front down to the south is going to change over to a warm front. So where's that warm front? Well, with these freezing temperatures up in Oklahoma, I would think that warm front is still to the south. And let me see if I can find where it shows up. Looks like maybe it's right around here. This is going to be Saturday during the day. I think it may be in this zone right here. So this is the start of return flow, and tracking these fronts can be pretty important, because you may have a little bit of pooled moisture up along the caprock maybe, and with that front coming up, that can be a focus for development. And especially if we have upper level support, these return fronts coming northward can really focus severe weather. And pretty quick warm-up, and by later during the day on Saturday, we're already up to near 75 in Big Spring and Abilene there. And here comes another outbreak of cold air. Okay, let's look at the Midwest. I don't know if we have anybody in Nebraska or Kansas. I think we got a couple of viewers there in Denver. But to keep things moving along, I'm going to focus on the Midwest here, because that'll really let us look at the cold air mass, because this is where things are happening. This is what it looked like earlier today. Midday, people on lunch break, 18Z, 3 degrees in Minneapolis there, and 7 in Green Bay. So some very cold air lurking up to the north. And looks like 20 in Chicago, so a bit of a gradient south of Wisconsin. So we could basically go from 11 in northern Illinois up to almost 40 near Paducah. So let's track the cold air coming south. Not much of an advance of cold. Well, I guess it does kind of come on down. So there it is, spreading southward. It's just not heading down towards Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and all that. It's mostly heading southeast. So starting out tomorrow morning, this is what it looks like. The high pressure area over Missouri. Looks like a 1039 millibar high there, and that's, of course, moving southeast. So much of the cold air advection will be focused on this area here. Then during the day, a bit of a warm-up, lots of sunshine. And Chicago getting up to almost 20 there. 28 at St. Louis, 34 at Kansas City, and coming up to 13 at Minneapolis. And that's warmer than what we had today, so we are seeing a kind of a fast modification of this air mass. And then going into Saturday, southerly flow setting in there. And then we get our warm-up on Saturday, and we're already up to freezing at Chicago and all the way up into northern Iowa there. And then very quickly, I'll take a look at the southeast U.S. Just watch that cold air spilling southward. There it is. This is daybreak right here. So the front's already come through Pensacola and New Orleans there. And looks like it spread all the way into, let me take a look at this real quick. Yeah, there. Cold front already up to Tampa by afternoon. And there it is spreading into the southeast part of Florida. So it looks like for Saturday morning, we're going to be looking at 47 in Tampa, 39 at Jacksonville, and 64 at Miami there. And then coming up to only 72 for a high in Miami on Saturday. Okay, so now we've got a pretty good grounding what's happening with the air masses. We know where everything is. Talking about it verbally really helps set that in our mind what's happening. So let's check out a couple soundings. And probably a good one to start with is going to be Minneapolis. They're going to definitely be up in that cold air. And yeah, showing up very cold there. 15 below Celsius, which is about 4 above Fahrenheit at the surface. And that layer extends all the way up to about 4,000 feet as almost a dry adiabatic lapse rate. It's kind of taken a slope kind of like that, similar to these green lines. So that's dry adiabatic. And this is indicative of very strong air mass modification. So probably a gusty winds if you're flying into Minneapolis. Would expect a lot of mechanical turbulence in the lowest 2,000 feet of the atmosphere or so. Then above that, we pick up the frontal inversion. And then above that, we've got a bit of a modified, I don't know if we want to call that tropical, but it's definitely warmer. I don't think that's going to be tropical. Well, it comes up to about 30 to 25. That's probably, yeah, it's probably some colder air. Maybe advected in from Canada there. And then we pick up the stratosphere. That's the tropopause there at 27,000 feet. And then we got the stratosphere above that. Let's take a look way up in Canada. Let's try Cambridge Bay. See what they look like. Sounding way over to the left there. This here is the Arctic air mass. And above that, we've got the continental polar air mass. And then above that, the stratosphere. And then we'll take a look down in Miami. I'll pull up Miami, and we see a bit of a substance inversion there. It kind of looks like a frontal inversion there, doesn't it? Kind of. But the key is that if you look at the dew point line doesn't follow the temperature line over like that. Instead, it goes like this. And there's a lot of dry mid-level air, so there's probably been a subtropical ridge working on this area. Downward motion that gives us drying in the mid-levels and warmer temperatures, and that gives us this spread out appearance at these levels. So if you took a balloon up to about 8,000 feet, you'd still be up above 50 Fahrenheit. And below that, we've got a dry adiabatic lapse rate, surprisingly unstable. in the lower levels and quite a bit of moisture. Looks like we've got pretty much mid to upper 50s dew points all the way up to about 5,000 feet there at Miami. But not enough to give us any severe weather. Let me give you a quick parcel. This is all negative areas, so there's no way we're going to get any rain there in Miami. Now, it's possible you could if you had a little bit of moisture in the mid-levels, like right here. You might be able to construct a little bit of a positive area there, but you're not going to be able to rain from 30,000 feet and hit the surface like that. But when we see that pattern there in the mid-levels, yeah, sometimes that will hit the surface there. So that's one thing we would watch for. The parcels that these SCUT plots give you, you can use them as a guide, but you've got to kind of watch out for these elevated layers because these sites don't handle those very well. Okay, let's check out the GOES satellite and just take a look what's going on. You can see the subtropical cirrus moving into Texas there. And let me see here. Quite a bit of chat. Ryan Toomey is reporting a cool day in South Florida, temperatures in the mid-60s. Albert Rodriguez, welcome. And Electric Dog also. Mr. Manlett did a surface analysis, very good. I'll have to take a look at that later, unfortunately. So I've got to keep things moving along, and I've actually got a pizza waiting, believe it or not. David Moore says, be careful when discussing Area 51. Something always happens to the stream. Well, yeah, our viewer counts are going up. So, yeah, I guess something did happen. Carl Burkhoff is with us. Megan John heading to the Minnesota Arrowhead. Brought warm clothes. Oh boy, yeah, you definitely want to pack for that. And Ryan says, thank goodness the weather is primarily cooperating with airlines. Megan John noting the cold wave spilling over. And let me just go through this real quickly. Justin Pulliam's here. David Holcomb is better late than never. Justin Pulliam says, have you seen the GOES 16 True Color? It's awesome. Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that. NOAA's finally got a good GOES 16 site, and they've got a few products there. And very good. So anyway, we can see the cold air spilling southward. This is infrared. And when we start seeing the greens, the dark greens and yellows, which are not moving, that's a good sign that we've got cold air in the area. See right here, this animation here, there's nothing moving. Like here's a river plain. So this is all very, very cold air. Meanwhile, yeah, this is a mid and upper level cloud in the Pittsburgh area. And then a quick look at water vapor imagery. Looks like we've got a subtropical jet in the area, maybe, I don't know, probably across central Texas like that. That's my initial guess there. And then up north we would find the polar front jet, and I suspect it's running something like that right there. So let's head into the forecast. And I'm going to start with the hemispheric chart here. So there's our current jet stream winds at 300 millibars, 30,000 feet. And that jet is about where I said it was. There's the polar front jet. And then down further south we find a little hint of the subtropical jet. But pretty good polar vortex centered across Hudson Bay and Baffin Island right there. And this is actually circulating warm air northward and around Greenland and back south into Canada. So there's a little bit of that going on. And we've got a blocking pattern out in the Pacific right there. Other than that, I guess we've got probably a 5 long wave pattern. Something like that right there. 5 waves, progressive. It's only being locked up, I think, by this blocking pattern. That's been due to some warm air that has moved into Siberia a few days ago. So let's see how things look, and this is probably where I can show you the cold air moving northward on the east coast of Greenland. And yeah, wow, look at that warm air over eastern Siberia there. In fact, let me see if I can bring up the chart. We'll set this up for Siberia. And here we go. Yeah, let's see. I think that might be bad data. Let me get rid of that and replot that. I want to see just how warm it is over that part of Siberia. It looks like it's kind of dampened off a little bit, but we're still seeing temperatures around 11 to 15, and that's definitely on the warm side for that area. Normal temperatures are something like what you see out here, minus 54, minus 57, and lots of minus 40s out in western Siberia there. And I think a lot of that warm air may be aloft that we're seeing right there. So let's check out the next week. Here comes the cold air southward into the U.S. Meanwhile, up here in Greenland, we can see the warm air sneaking around into the Arctic. And that's kind of significant because that comes around across the North Pole and then down into Canada. And here you can see an intrusion of that air. And it's not only warm air, it's actually precipitable water, some unusually high amounts. And so we get kind of some blizzards and snowstorms in the high Arctic, a very dynamic pattern there. So you can see some of that cold air, that mild air sneaking southward on the 8th across Canada there. A little bit of cold air formation. So it's kind of a complicated pattern. And then here comes some more warm air alternating with cold air. And let's see how this resolves. Yeah, looks like that pattern finally breaks up towards mid-month there. Now for the forecast, I decided to look at the Canadian model, if I can find it. There it is. I'm going to use the Canadian model because it looked like the GFS was going a little bit too aggressive with that 1050 and 1060 millibar high around the 9th, and it looks like it's backed off on that a bit. So the GDPS, it seems like this is a Canadian model, and it appears that it has kind of been a little bit more neutral as far as that goes. So I think this is kind of a good solution. So starting out, here's the cold air coming south, 1036 millibar high. And a little bit of snow for the Appalachians and northeast U.S. But that high will be moving southeastward on Friday. A little bit of a warm-up for the Central Plains tomorrow. And this is going to be a very fast-moving pattern. So this high is already on its way out. Another front coming south. This is number 2. I should use that text tool. How do I do that? Yeah, there we go. Number 2. All right. So cold air coming south, and that's going to move into, well, we get a little bit of a wave there in Iowa and the Chicago area. So probably a little bit of snow there. And this is driven by a 1038 millibar high over Alberta on Saturday there. And that dives southward, affects Texas and the southern U.S. there. And then looks like we get maybe number 3, outbreak number 3. That looks like that system coming southward. Again, only about a 1034 millibar high. A little bit more snow for Kansas there. And this is going to be about Tuesday. And a little bit more wave activity there in Texas and Arkansas and the Memphis area. Okay, so that's out of the picture. Looks like we get a Pacific system move across the Canada-U.S. border. And then Alberta Clipper coming south. So this is, I think, number 3 or 4. Maybe number 4. But anyway, we're up to the 8th right there. And this will go through the Great Lakes region. And then the cold front itself will move southward on the 9th. And a little bit more wintry weather there in Kansas and Oklahoma. And things look a little bit unsettled in the southwestern U.S. there. You see the thickness pattern. The thickness pattern is kind of a clue to what's happening aloft. And we can see a little bit of troughiness out here. So I might be looking at maybe a bit of a wintry storm coming together around the Four Corners area. So maybe something like that on the surface chart. Okay, so this is something we would have to watch. This is on Saturday the 10th, next weekend, not this weekend. And that's going to head towards Texas and Oklahoma. And we can see it kind of riding over the top. A little bit of a mixed precip in the Texas area. And then we should see that emerge on the other side. Yeah, there it is right there. And then our wave kind of moves, I guess, up the Appalachians on the 11th and 12th. Another Alberta Clipper coming south. This one looks a little weaker, and then we get to the end. That's the end of the Canadian sequence. And let's pick that up with the GFS. And I'll just compare this real quick around the 8th and 9th. So the Canadian model was going for a bit of a southwestern U.S. system. I think that was right around here. This is around the 10th and 11th. So we're on the GFS now, the U.S. model. And looks like the GFS going a little bit warmer and not so far south. So it'll be interesting to see which one wins out there. Anyway, there goes that wave. Looks like we'll have some weather somewhere in the south U.S. And then another outbreak coming south. Looks like a 1050 high there. And let's see how the rest of it plays out. Another little high moving south. And typically when we have these really aggressive northwesterly flow patterns, we do tend to get a whole lot of cold air in the U.S. And as you can see, the reason we're not having that is because of the entrainment of that warm air up in the polar regions that I showed you earlier. So that's really had an influence on this northwesterly flow pattern. And it's not quite as cold as we would normally expect this time of year. And that's about all we have here. This is the end of the run for the 16th, 17th. Looks like the Gulf is open for Texas, maybe kind of a warm pattern. And then at the very end, looks like maybe some more Arctic air developing up north. Okay, so that's it for the charts. We'll just take a quick look out in the Pacific there. And let me take a look at chat. 31 people, very good. Glad to see the viewer numbers. In fact, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how things are going to be during severe weather season. A little discussion there about the fronts and the snowy forecast. And I think it's probably about time to hit the pizza here. So anyway, I appreciate you all watching the webcast. Thanks for joining. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Take care and have a good evening.